To start our interview off, who are you?
My name is John Puffer. I live in Vincennes. That's in Indiana. I consider myself to be a photographer before being an artist. There's a lot of controversy. Is photography really art? But of course, we've been fighting that battle for 150 years now. But in any case, I started taking pictures when I was about 12, and my mother was given a box camera for Christmas, and I was fascinated with it. And she said, "We'll go take some pictures with it, of the family, and blah, blah, blah." Well, I was hooked. So I learned how to develop film, and my father helped me create a dark room in the basement. So up and through high school, I did a lot of my own developing and so forth. It really came down to what was I going to do when I went away to college, when I graduated. Well, I was really good in math, and so it sounded more practical than photography or art. And I really had no experience with traditional art, drawing. I didn't draw, I didn't paint, so I became a math major. Until I had a class at 7 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter. And that sort of squashed that. And about this time, this was in 1962 or 3, several what we now call fine art photographers, such as Ansel Adams, would be a name you've heard of, along with my professor, whose name is John Schultz, Henry Holmes Smith at Indiana University. About 10 of these guys throughout the United States who were in art departments but also loved photography said, "Why don't we start curricula based on photography within art departments?" And so Iowa was one of the first, and that's where I was going to school. And so I took a class, and of course loved it, and I said, this is probably what I need to be doing, not math. And so I continued. But I wasn't a very good student, and so I dropped out several times, and then Vietnam came along, and I was drafted. But for whatever reason, I was not a combat soldier. I was made a medic for no reason. It's just, when you're drafted, it's a coin toss. So I was sent to Japan, and I was sent to a research unit where we did research with an electron microscope. And I was assigned to that group. And of course, we had a dark room. That's part of doing research. And I picked it up again and decided that when I got out of the Army, I would go back and finish my degree, which I did. I didn't really want to teach. I wanted to be rich and famous. And we can see how well that worked out. But teaching came by accident. A teacher at the local community college, I was living in Iowa City, Iowa at the time, the University of Iowa is there. I had some friends who taught at a local community college, and they said their art history teacher, this was 3 days before the semester started, the art history teacher was deported. He was from a South American country, and his visa was not proper. We don't know. Could I do that? Well, I loved art history, and I ended up teaching a basic survey of art history course, which I loved. I loved doing that. I thought, gee, I guess I could teach. And so I continued to apply to teaching jobs. I ended up getting a full-time job at that community college, and then wanted a tenure track college job, teaching job, which were hard to get, but I tried. I sent out resumes, and I sort of bounced around. I went there to Missouri State. It's called Missouri State now. It's called Southwest Missouri State at the time, in Springfield. Then I went to Drury College, which is a private school. Then I went to Emporia State in Kansas. And then I came to Vincennes University, where I retired in 2006 or so. But I continued to photograph and travel. I traveled by means of taking students on tours of Europe and Italy and Greece. Did that almost every summer for many years while I taught. I loved doing it. I liked students, and I liked having a free trip to Europe. So it all seemed good. We were allowed to stay behind after the tour was over. If we got our students onto the plane safely, correctly, so no one was left out, we could stay behind as long as we wanted, and we would get free air for our home. So I've traveled to Egypt, I've been to Greece, Italy, France, England. That's about it. But I favor Italy. I don't know why. Probably from my studies of art history. My art history professor is still a good friend. In fact, as I said, I got an email from him just yesterday saying congratulations on this exhibit and so forth. So it was this particular professor that got me to love, especially the ancient world. And I think Pompeii fits right into that. When I first started photographing in Pompeii, I believe it was 1995 was my first trip. I was mostly impressed with the wall paintings, but even the damaged ones had kind of an abstract kind of excitement to them in the randomness of the colors that were remaining, and some of the photographs in this show exhibit that, and some of these are older. But as time went on, I became interested in the actual site, the location, the room, the building it was in, what was the story there. In particular, the one of the cast of the 9-year-old girl in one of the public baths. She was a slave, you can tell by the clothing. These are casts made, as most people know, I think, maybe. These are plaster casts of the bodies of those who died in the volcanic ash at the moment of their death. As 2,000 years went on, most of their bodies simply dissipated into the soil. But in many cases, parts of their skeletons were left. But in any case, a kind of a hollowing in the volcanic ash remained, like a mold. And the early excavators thought, what if we poured plaster into these molds? And so there are plaster casts of some 200 individuals, most of which are on display. This is one of the later casts, I'm guessing, because it's a very good one. The early ones are really, it's hard to recognize anything because they really didn't know what they were doing. But that particular room affected me a great deal in terms of the girl and who she was and how she came to be in that room. As much as archaeologists know, she was a slave, and along with approximately 10 other people were found in that room. And they were probably all slaves, and they were attendants in the baths. The public baths were kind of like the gyms and exercise establishments we have these days. Very similar. People would go there for social reasons, to work out. They had workout rooms and gymnasiums. But the public baths were a place where people could just go and hang out for an hour, kind of like a sauna, and hobnob with other people. Men and women were separate, but one wonders what her job was. And I still recall going into that room on the first time I was in there and really literally getting choked up over that. And I think that was what turned the corner for me into getting more involved in where these places are. Whose room was that, for example, and what happened there, and what is this all about, and what is that all about? And plus, I was chided by my art history professor. There's one of the photographs that shows some sculptural figures of muscular, strong-looking men, and I just called them giants. And my art history professor gave me some feedback on that, and he said they are not giants. They are a very particular mythological figure in both Greek and Italian mythology. And if you're gonna give them a title, make it more accurate. So that in the beginning, that got me going into finding out more about each of these places. Well, as I mentioned before, I wasn't very good about taking notes as I was photographing over the years. So I really tried Googling a lot on the internet to find out where some of these places were. And I was semi-successful, but in my Googling, I discovered a website. This retired couple in England has made their life's work to record every single wall, room, space, street, sign, everything, anything to do with Pompeii. And apparently over the years, other people have contributed images. So some of their photographs go back to the 19th century. So they have a website called, I'm going to have to remember it, something about everything Pompeii, something like that. And it's in England. It's a nice old couple, and I've written to them several times. They helped me. They knew where every single photograph was taken of the 66 that I chose to be in the final portfolio that are in the book. And they helped me a great deal come to terms with my failure to take notes on, for example, where that is and where that is. So these photographs have been made over a period of 20 plus years, I like to say. Some are, most of these are fairly recent, in the last 5 years. What else would you like to know? I have 3 ex-wives and 2 daughters and a stepdaughter and a step-granddaughter. I'm single. I live in a 160-year-old building in Vincennes on the National Register.
Decided to do this show. Why Pompeii?
Well, as I said, I've been photographing and putting together a portfolio of my Pompeii photographs. I mean, I've photographed all over Italy and all over Greece and in Egypt as well. What inspired me really was the spirit of the people who lived there, 79 AD. The spirit of the people who left their homes behind, the spirit of the people who weren't able to get out for one reason or another. Estimates of 2,000 to 3,000 people died. But it was a town probably about the size of Crawfordsville. Estimates of about 40 or 50,000. Well, that might be a high estimate, but it's the sense that I'm stepping into their house, that I'm their guest. And if I'm going to be that person, I want to express myself properly, not just snapshots. I do take snapshots. I have a granddaughter, really. But to see if I can record something of their lives to bring 2,000 years forward to the people of 2020. There's a sense, too, of the time between the eruption and now. For example, in this photograph of some reliefs of what are called genius figures, or genii figures, which evolved later into our cupids today. They are not cupids. They are advisors. That's their role, their mythological role. But this is on the temple of Isis. And if you know anything about ancient history, Isis was a famous goddess of Egypt. And you may wonder, how do Romans come to worship a god from way on the other side of the Mediterranean? Well, it had to do with Cleopatra. And Julius Caesar bringing Cleopatra to Rome to show her off because they were going to be married. And so people got interested in Cleopatra. She was very popular with the Romans at that time. And so these temples to Isis cropped up all over southern Italy. It's a very small temple, it's a very small building. The actual building is probably smaller than this gallery, this whole gallery. And it's not architecturally very significant. But if you look closely in the photograph, you can see people have scratched graffiti, which is horrible that they have done that. But it also gives you a sense that people have been here for a long time. Because some of the graffiti goes back to when Pompeii was just discovered in the late 1600s. And so, you can, sometimes you'll actually see a date, like here it's 1818 or something like that. So it kind of brings together a melding of different spirits, the spirits of the original people and the spirits of the people who came there to wonder at this amazing look into the ancient world. There is nothing like Pompeii anywhere. We had no idea how Romans lived, how the Italians lived during the Roman Empire. And this is really this and its sister city of Herculaneum. And there are a couple smaller towns too that you don't hear about. Stabia is one, and a few others. But it's the sense of their ghosts almost. This is one of my favorite places. This is a villa, and it's incredibly well preserved. And you can see the tile floor and the paintings on the wall. This is the foyer. This is, you go in, this is their house. They were very self-sufficient. It's a huge, almost a mansion, we would call it today. They produce their own wine. There's a grape press in the back, a 2,000-year-old grape press. They had their own bakery. They made their own bread, and probably did had a cook or several cooks. This is called the Villa of the Mysteries, and it's the paintings, not the ones you see in this photograph, but the paintings in the next room are in all the art history books. They show some strange ritual that we don't know what it means. Young women being inducted into some sort of secret society, is best we can describe it. But, you just got the sense, since this is so well preserved, of the house and the people who lived there, and this room with these strange paintings on the wall that we don't really fully understand. But it's a beautiful house. It's outside, just outside the actual city limits of Pompeii, as it was at the time. So tourists usually don't go there. They have to want to know where it is. They have to know, where's the Villa of the Mysteries? Because I studied that in college, kind of thing. And so you do see some people there. But just the space, for me, the space too, just on a perfect elements of art kind of approach. The space of this room is very interesting. You can kind of see around the wall, as opposed to, say, this one, which is very flat.
Let's talk about the tools you use, the processes you use.
Sure. The earliest ones in this exhibit, and there might only be two, were taken with film, with famous old-fashioned Kodak film, or in this case, Fuji film. This one and that one, that lower fat one. I think those are the only two. Oh no, this is film too. You can tell film because it's not quite as sharp. Although these were not taken with 35 millimeter film. These were taken with a larger format film. When they get enlarged this much, they do kind of get a little soft. For a long time, I used what's called a medium format camera, which takes a piece of film about that size, about 2 1/4 by 2 3/4, something like that. But when digital came along, I just decided I wasn't going to use it until I could be assured that it would produce images of equal quality to what I was already doing. So I continued into film for a long time. But I did get into scanning digitally my negatives. So I was partially digital. I purchased a large format printer, and so those two, and one other, that one, oh now I see 3, so it's 3 with film. They were printed digitally on a large Epson inkjet printer, but the original image was on color film. Once I could do that, and I did buy a little tiny digital camera when they first came out, and it was interesting to work with. The quality wasn't very good, so I sort of held off for a while, but when both Nikon and Canon and some of the other manufacturers came out with really high-end digital cameras that could beat film hands down, I saved my pennies and bought a larger digital camera. And I think I'm on my 3rd one now. But they are digital. So they are originally digital then, most of them, but they are not all single photographs. In fact, most aren't. Ones like this are actually a single photograph, but some of the ones that appear a little longer, like that one and several of the others, are actually panoramas of at least 3 separate images put together in Photoshop. Originally, I printed them that way. Originally, I would print them as separate prints and then mount them in a window map. But when Photoshop, plus there was some other software that digitally figured out how best to fit the images together, it seemed a little bit of cheating, but the result is really nice. And I don't really want the viewer to think of these as panoramas. I mean, you see panoramic landscape photos and, 180-degree sweep of the landscape and so forth. I don't want that to be the effect that the viewer gets from my photograph. I want them to look at it as a single photograph, even though it's not. In fact, probably 75% of these are made from at least 3 photographs. Sometimes as many as 5 or 6. So as I said, I print digitally with a large format Epson printer. It's a little old now, it's getting like me, and it's getting a little kind of rickety, but it still works. I think I've had it for about 12 years now. And that's really a long time in digital printing.
No long time for an Epson.
No, well, not for mine. I'm on the internet a lot with other Epson users, and there are some people that are using printers older than mine. I find that amazing because mine clogs all the time, and you have to pray to the Epson gods, and you have to do things to your printer that are kind of scary. I mean, because they cost so much, and you think, gee, what if I do this and I break it? So. There are ways to get rid of clogs, but clogging is the way of life of anyone who does digital printing. It just happens, no matter what brand you have. So, I guess I could finish. They're all matted in archival. They're in 100% acid-free cotton fiber mat, window mats, and the frames are metal, and they're backed by acid-free foam core. So. As long as these don't have direct sunlight on them, they're going to last for hundreds of years. Because the inks are not dyes as the early inkjet printers were. I had an inkjet printer at school where I taught, and the colors were just beautiful, but within 2 or 3 months, they faded. Mm-hmm. Even though they were in a box. So the inks that they use now are semi-permanent. As long as they're framed and properly and displayed without sunlight on them.
Who are some other artists that inspire you? Artistic periods? I mean, artist periods.
Well, having taught art history survey, I mean, every art teacher has their favorites, but in terms of photography, the ones that I was first exposed to as a teenager when I was hot for photography and I wanted to do that are not the kinds of photographers that would make photographs like I make. The Frenchman Cartier-Bresson, who is sometimes called a glorious snap shooter, but he coined a phrase, the decisive moment, because photography could do that for the first time. It could take a slice of time in life, of a person jumping or walking in a way that no other art form, painting, hadn't done, because they hadn't thought of it. Because photography hadn't been invented yet, being invented in 1839. So Cartier-Bresson, Ansel Adams, famous landscape photographer. I love his work, but I don't photograph like he does. So I was inspired. I think their work inspired me to try to be more myself and not to imitate. But that doesn't mean I can't appreciate other photographers. I'm amazed. I'm just amazed at most well-known photographers' work. I mean, there's a reason why they're well-known. As far as other artists, that could, that's a lot. I actually like the Romantic painters in the 1820s.
Really?
Turner. Yeah, he's great. He's wild. There's a great movie about Turner. A little bit controversial, but there is in the last 5 years.
What artist isn't controversial?
Yeah, really, you have to be a little. But I like Monet too, and I don't make photographs like Monet. I like the Impressionists, and I'm not jaded by their work at all. Everybody had a Monet calendar for the longest time. There were a lot of Monet shows. A lot of his work was traveling around the world, and I just like his work. Maybe Van Gogh, but not so much. I mean, Monet worked until his vision was gone so far that he couldn't see the canvas. He would have to get this far away from it. And the story goes that his arthritis got so bad that he would tape brushes to his hands. I mean, that kind of thing just gives me chills. I mean, I want to be that kind of artist. I really do. More modern artists? I don't know. Not much in the 20th century, really. I did like the Dadaists and the Surrealists because they were so nuts. They were just absolutely crazy. Mm-hmm. Especially the Dadaists, like Marcel Duchamp. I mean, I just thought that was great. Of course, that led into World War II and the Nazis and all that. So yeah, I can't think of any others. No, but when you teach art history, you have to give the impression that you love it all. Because otherwise your students will say, oh, he doesn't like that person, I won't worry about that. That won't be on the test. So, yeah, so that's hard. But those are my early inspirations were other photographers, mainly. And I would spend my paper route money on popular photography and look at all the ads and wish I could have those cameras and wish I could be those photographers. And that went on for a long time. So I kind of held true to what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be originally, once I decided. Once I decided I didn't want to be a fireman or a truck driver.
Let's see here.
Although both honorable professions.
Very much so.
Yep.
Do you do your work for you, or is what inspires the reasoning behind doing your work?
At this point in my life, yeah, totally for myself. Because I think every artist at some point in their career or their life says, wow, if I made art like this, it would sell. And it never does, because it's not honest. And so the times I've tried to do that failed miserably. I think people could just see, that I wasn't that interested in what I was making. So I had a professor. Go back to graduate school. I had a professor, a painting professor, who was famous. Not that you'd ever have heard of him, but he represented the United States at the Venice Biennale one year, which is the big European art show. And 2 artists from each country are represented. At least that's how it used to be. And so he was famous. He knew what life was like as an artist. And we would always ask him questions, and he was always open. He ran away, as a boy, with the circus. And so his art was he made paintings of the circus people, in a way that was similar to circus posters that they would use to advertise. In fact, that's how he got started painting. He would do circus posters for the circus, for Ringling Brothers. And then that turned into an art form for him. And so that was his fallback. He always said that if his art didn't work out, he could always work with the circus because he had a good reputation there, they liked him. And so his advice was, to any art student, have a profession other than art. Have a skill, something you can do. I mean, whether it's waiting tables or anything. A job you can do that you're comfortable with that will support your art while you're getting to the point where your art supports you, if that ever happens. And that was the best advice I got. So I worked, after I got out of the Army, I worked for many years as an electron microscope technician, which I learned in the Army. That's what I was in the Army, a medic. But it put me through the rest of undergrad school and grad school, all the way to my MFA. So I did that part-time. It took 8 years to get a bachelor's and another, should only take 2.5. So, but I worked. I worked in hospitals, in research, full-time, had a family at the time, but I was able to make my art, my photographs also. And so that's the best advice I got, and which I would pass on, and I always did pass on to my students.
Other hobbies?
Yes. I play. I don't play much anymore, but I played soccer in college and started coaching about 30 years ago girls, because my girlfriend's daughter was 5 and was on a soccer team, and they didn't have a coach. They had 2 parents who didn't even know the rules. And so I volunteered to help out. And first of all, 5-year-old girls are wild. They're hilarious. I really just loved it. Trying to teach them soccer. And the daughter of my then girlfriend actually got quite good at soccer as well as basketball. And so that's a hobby. I still coach. I coach a middle school girls team right now and have for several years. Coached high school girls, always girls, because I have girls. I probably mistakenly think that I understand girls. But I'll say that I think I understand them more than I would boys. I wouldn't know what to do with boys. They're crazy as far as I'm concerned. They're wild animals. Girls are wild in other ways, but not like boys. Anyway, I can deal with girls, I think. So I've always enjoyed. So I've coached as high as, we attempted to start a women's soccer team at Vincennes University 1 year. It didn't work out very well, so I tried coaching that. And then went back to high school. So I spent a lot of time coaching girls in various high schools in Knox County in Indiana. And so now I'm doing middle school. They're good too. So we lost last night 5-0, which is a skunk. We had only had 1 day of practice because of the virus before this game came up, and we opted to play the game anyway. We could have canceled it. But it was a team we beat last year for the championship. So we wanted to see where we were, and they're a lot better than they were last year, and we're not as good. So that's my main hobby. For a while, I had the hobby of cooking. I like to cook. I do like to cook, but when you live alone, it's, you're cooking for yourself. And with the virus, you can't invite people over. I mean, we can, but so I don't do that as much anymore. But that's really it. It's my photography and coaching soccer. Those are my hobbies. I do take snapshots too. I have a website. I have lots of photographs of my granddaughter and my daughter as she was growing up, and photographs from all over the world on my website. So anyone interested can go to it.
And the last question is, let people know about your social medias, your websites, how to get a hold of you, your book.
I have a book of the entire Pompeii What Remains portfolio. And this, did we decide there were 25?
24.
24 here, of 66 in the book. That's available. I have a website, jpuffer.com, very simple. And I have a lot of photographs on that website, divided into locations, periods of time, subject matter. It's not organized, it's a mess. But you can wander around it. It was designed using a really old system, and every year I swear I'm going to learn web design. I don't have the patience. I mean, I learned Photoshop, I had patience there, but web design, it's just, I cannot stay focused. So I have a Facebook page, but only because my daughter made me. I don't use it except to put out instructions for my soccer team girls' parents. That's about all I use my Facebook for. So just the website is about it. But I have books for sale, and I have business cards here in the gallery. So if somebody wanted to contact me, it's easy to do.
All right. Well, then that will be the end of the show.
Great.